Train to the Plastic Underground. Approaching the station, please stand away from the platform edge.
Hey, what's up everybody? Welcome back to the Plastic Underground. This week I did something fun. I made Babu Frick and the doorway from that episode of The Mandalorian when they're on Navarro and they're working on the IG droid. So I thought it'd be fun to make his little door. And this is a 3D print that I got off of Thingiverse. And everything's all painted. And the doorway is made out of EVA foam. I thought it would be fun in the basement eventually when I do my Star Wars room build to actually like cut a hole out of the drywall and put like an actual little like workshop in there so that this doorway could like lead to this like actual little room. I thought that'd be kind of fun. And since I don't have the room build yet, this kind of inspires me to get to it. So yeah, this is how I made it. I have the patterns for you guys, and you can make your own little doorway for your little Babu Frick guys. So yeah, let's get to it. Let me show you how I made it.
Alright, so to start off this build, let's start with the door first, and we can get into some detail of all the painting and sanding and all that kind of fun stuff. So, using some floor mat foam here, I drew this template onto some paper. And this is what I am going to be using for this door, is just some EVA floor mat foam. This is like 10 millimeter basically. And so yeah, I traced out the big section, and now I'm just tracing out the inside section for the outside ring. And this is the inside here of the door. This door has like two layers. It has like an outside door and like an inside kind of door. So this is the template for the outside part. So I'm just cutting out some 10 millimeter EVA foam for this little round part here in the middle. Then I go ahead and cut out the inside of that template out, so I can cut that out of some 2 millimeter. So this would be the like top detail like panel. And then the top and bottom of these like little wing parts of the door, these all get some 5 millimeter craft foam. So I'm just using a little bit of black here and using my gold Sharpie to draw on the black so that you can see the black pretty good. I need 4 of these all together for the right and the left side of the door. So I just go ahead and flip those around and always trace the front and back side just so you have the mirror of your template. So again, these are some of the top detail parts that will get cut out of some 2 millimeter foam. And yeah, so I just draw these on. I traced the full template first onto the 5 millimeter foam, then I cut out the inside detail to trace, so it's a lot easier. Make sure you get your shape. Sometimes if you cut the inside part, it can kind of wiggle and move around when you're tracing it, so that's why I do that. And you can see here the door pieces actually fit inside the door itself that I will cut out now. I'm using my straight edge here just to cut these parts of the door straight. Now I can pop the inside out, and this outer ring becomes the outside ring of the door. Using some scrap foam, the actual like puzzle part that you always rip off and throw out. I always keep those, and this is a good example. I was able to use a section of that here to do the inside wall of the door. This gave the door some depth and also some stability. And I go ahead and trim those corners off. Then I can cut everything out with my X-Acto knife and my hobby knife, depending on if I need a smaller blade or a bigger blade for certain shapes and corners. But yeah, just go ahead and go through and cut everything out. On the 2mm detail pieces, same thing. I'm just getting everything cut out and looking at stuff as I go, making sure everything kind of fits and is looking pretty good. So these back door parts are the back door, and these I glue on to another piece of 10mm floor mat foam just to make these 20 millimeters thick, just to make them a little thick. And I just get these cut out, again, using both blades so I can get into some tighter corners. And we're going to clean these up with the Dremel anyway, so it's not a big deal. And this is how this door gets put together here on the side. Then I use my Dremel here. You can see how rough that one is. And so basically what I do with the Dremel is I just kind of round out the edges, just kind of give it a nice soft edge. Same thing with the back door. You can tell the difference between the one on the right and the one on the left. So these are the same thickness as the door, so I needed to add some scrap foam onto the edges of these so that I had a place to glue these to the door frame itself. So that's all I did. I just used these puzzle piece edges here and just kind of sticking those in place on the back side of the door. And that's where I put the glue. And that is where I glue these doors to the door frame. I kind of pre-marked where it needed to go. And then just slowly kind of tack it around the side. Making sure that I go slow here so that the door frame itself doesn't get warped. It's very easy to like glue these in place and have the door be kind of weird, kind of warped at an angle. It is foam, so you can kind of just heat it and use your strength to kind of bend it again. So it's not the end of the world if it is a little warped. So just getting a rough idea where I want these to sit. And I marked that, and then I'm just using the same contact cement as always just to tack these in place. Kind of eyeballing it here, making sure that it's the same thickness. But I do that on both sides, and then I spray this whole thing down with some black Plasti Dip. There's a couple good coats of Plasti Dip. I think I heat sealed it first. I usually do, even if I don't show in the video. I pretty much always will hit it with a heat gun first and then seal it with Plasti Dip. So just using this matte white spray paint here, just giving it kind of a quick coat. I'm not trying to like coat this 100%. I want it to be white. I want it to show through white. But I don't get crazy on this step here because I kind of like the fadedness. And now it's going to get this brown and yellow mix. This is going to be a wash. Wanted it to look like dirt and sand and grime and grease and that kind of stuff. That planet that this doorway is from is Navarro. It's kind of a sandy Tatooine type planet with a lot of like volcanic and ash and that kind of stuff. So I just wanted to make sure that I just dirty these up. Nothing in Star Wars is clean. That's kind of the beauty of it, and that's why it's fun to make stuff, because if you do make mistakes here and there, you can just weather it and just pretend like it's supposed to be that way, you know? Which is kind of why I like it, because It's a lot easier. But yeah, so then I go on top with a darker brown wash. And this I try to not wipe off as much. I'm trying to keep this mainly in corners and some areas where like you wouldn't be able to clean it. Then I'm looking at this reference image here and just going through here with some dark brown. That's not really dark brown. It's like a chestnut brown. And I'm just kind of dabbing this on areas. This is supposed to be like rust, like chips and stuff. And that's kind of what I was trying to mimic. So I make sure that the doorway that your feet are actually going in would be dirty, because that's where traffic is always going in. So that would be a lot dirtier than, say, like the top. So now that the doorway is done, we can get on to the actual time sink of this build. This took me a long time to paint. I was kind of nervous about painting the skin tones and stuff, and I'm not like super familiar and good at painting like organic stuff and skin tones and that kind of stuff. So this was kind of my first big dive into that type of stuff. But the first thing I do, obviously, after this comes off the printer and it gets cleaned up with isopropyl, is I go through and I make sure I glue everything together, using a little bit of tape here to hold this head piece in place, just to keep pressure on it. And then a little bit of glue here to his torso. And I always have a little bit of issues, not always, but I have stuff on the printer that happens occasionally. Like the top of this helmet, I think I printed this upside down. And so you can see the top's got some weird print lines in it, which is fine because you're just going to sand it all off anyway. But yeah, so for his hood piece, I'm using this technique where you put a little bit of super glue in that seam, and then you can use a little bit of baking powder. And it's kind of a mess, but I pour the baking powder out. You can put it in a dish or whatever, but like you're gonna get powder on the work area anyway. So like I was throwing this piece of paper out after I did this anyway, just because I have a lot of paint on it. But yeah, you just sprinkle that on top, and it like sets up instantly. It makes like this hard, like Mando type stuff. And then you can just go through here with my file, my pen file or small file, whatever they're called. And I'm just kind of reshaping the edge there a little bit and taking off some of like the bigger parts. Then I go through with some sandpaper, and I'm just really trying to smooth out that seam. Then I use a little bit of this Tamiya putty. This is for like model cars and that kind of stuff. This is a lot thinner of a paste, and it dries. It's air dry. So I just put a little bit of that on this little box here, and then I can kind of go through with this little chisel thing, and I just kind of basically just putty that into the seam, and kind of leave it a little high because it shrinks when it dries. And then for the bigger parts here, I use this steel stick. This is a 2-part like epoxy clay thing. I buy this stuff at the hardware store, or Harbor Freight carries it now too. It's supposed to just be like a 2-part epoxy for like all sorts of stuff. But I mix it together, and I roll out some snakes, and stick this in this seam here. Like I said, my printer kind of does that. I guess it depends on where you put your supports and stuff, and I probably could do that better, but yeah, but even if you don't, it's not a big deal. It just adds a little bit more work for you. So I just kind of smush all that stuff into the crease there, and then I kind of go through with this little ball tool, and I'm just kind of pushing that in place, making sure it's kind of smooth and that the gap is filled. And that stuff sands the same way everything else sands, so that's why I like using it for bigger stuff. Now, I could have painted this a gloss black, and it would have probably looked identical to how it ended up looking. But I really thought, hey, I should make this visor like an actual welding visor, because I have some of that stuff. So I'm cutting this out with my Dremel, and I cut this out and sand it and a bunch of stuff, and then get it ready. And after it's painted, I put a little bit of like a grinding shield in there. And yeah, I don't know. I know it's there. I don't know how much it added to the overall thing, but that's all right. There's a little stone bit on my Dremel that I can kind of go through quickly and sand this seam down a little faster than sandpaper. And it's soft enough where it's not going to really chew through the resin. But then everything gets sanded by hand. I go back through with like some 150 sandpaper and really spend time on that seam, but then also go through and really try to get out like seam lines and all that kind of stuff. So then I get to glue the arms on. Yeah, so I sanded everything first so I could reach everything before I put the arms on. And yeah, usually this arm should have been like, you should have been able to connect it to the shoulder, and then you wouldn't have seen it because it would have been underneath the visor. But yeah, these seams are like right in the middle of his bicep. So trying this new technique out here, and it worked really well. I'm taking some of my actual resin. This bottle's like pretty much empty, so it's kind of nice being able to use like up most of it, get your full money's worth out of it. But I'm just taking a little bit of a brush, and I'm just kind of dabbing that and letting it like run into the seam on its own. And yeah, using this thing, my wife bought this forever ago, and she doesn't really use it anymore. This is for like for doing your nails. She has like these it's like a UV curing nail polish, and she doesn't use it anymore. So I have I have added that to my shop collection. So yeah, it works the same way that like your UV cure thing works for your resin. And I filled that in and sanded those lines out, and I was pretty happy with how they ended up. But now that that's all done, I can go through with this bonding primer. This is a white bonding primer. I really like this stuff. I kind of bought this on a whim because I usually use like filler primer for like, you know, 3D prints and stuff. It fills in seams and scratches and that kind of stuff. But this bonding primer worked very well. It really sticks to your stuff, and your paint on top sticks to it very well. So yeah, I was really happy with it. But you see everything got that white base coat, and now it's funny, when everything's white or gray, it always looks like the actual like 3D render of your file, like when you buy files or when you get files. That's how stuff usually is. It's just like that flat color, like rendered. But now we can start adding some skin tone. I got this like peachy skin tone. I'm using my brush, and I'm just brushing this on. I try not to get too crazy up by his neck and shoulders because it is going to be covered. But for the most part, I do paint it just so I can visualize what it should look like all together. And this is like a little bit of gray and blue mixed together to make this kind of like bluish gray color. This is kind of like what his skin tone is. So he's got like this double colored skin tone, whereas like his front is kind of this peachy, and then the rest of him is kind of this gray color. So I go through and I paint all his skin this gray color, his fingers and his legs and his feet and all that kind of stuff. Just making sure all my details are painted first before I start like bulking out other parts of his like skin tone. And then I go in and I start painting around his face, and I'm looking at like references the whole time I'm painting, I wouldn't be able to do this without looking at reference images. And also the other thing that's important too is that to remember that like people aren't going to be staring at a reference image while they're looking at the thing that you built or painted. And sometimes I get really sucked into like the detail of stuff, and I get kind of like oh, you know, there's not, mine doesn't have this spot like right here, or should have this color should be in this area. But the important thing is that you use a reference image to get your coloring and your variations and, you know, that kind of stuff together. But my recommendation was like, don't get like super bogged down in the detail. Just kind of like enjoy the process. And the thing is too, is like right now, this looks pretty rough. like this doesn't look amazing at the moment, you know. But everybody will tell you, and the things that I've always heard is like just keep going. And it's all about layers. It's all about building color and building layers on top of layers on top of layers. So it's always going to look worse before it looks better. And the other thing too is that you can always just repaint this, right? I mean, if I really hated this, I would have just sprayed it white and started over. But like I'm saying, just keep going. Just keep adding layers. So if you add this layer and it's too light, then just let it dry and add like a dark wash to it, and then add a little bit white texture, lighter texture on top of that, and it kind of pulls through. And it also helps sell the illusion that there's multiple like stuff going on. You know, skin texture is very complex. It's got a lot of, it's not just one color. It's got a lot of stuff going on. You got veins and pores and all this stuff. So the more layers you add, the better and more realistic it ends up looking in the long run. And yeah, so that was a long-winded speech on painting, even though this is kind of like my first time painting and I'm not an expert. So I'm just kind of telling you some of the thoughts I had while I was painting. And yeah, I mean, if this came out and I wasn't happy with it and I didn't like it, like, you wouldn't be seeing this video and I wouldn't even be talking about it. So yeah. But I just keep adding layers, and now I'm going back through with a little bit of that peach, and I'm just kind of dry brushing the peach in some areas, trying to make it look like just some skin texture on some lighter spots around his fingers and around his toes and all that kind of stuff. And now you can start painting something a little bit easier and start painting his helmet. So I paint this yellow strip around the top, and I brush everything, all his helmet, with this brown. This brown ends up being too light for my taste, so I use this as kind of like a primer brown, and then I go over top of it with darker brown, and yeah, it looked a lot better. This brown actually ends up being closer to what I used for like his like hood and leather and that kind of stuff. So now that first kind of pass of his skin tone is dry, I mixed up this pink and peach wash, and now I'm going through and I'm just giving it a this pinkish wash over the whole like skin tone. This will get stuck like down in the like recesses and creases and crevices there of his face, and it kind of helps add that illusion where, you know, he's got a little bit of pigment underneath his skin. I also go through and I paint his entire mouth the same color. I darken it up a little bit later for like the inside of his mouth and stuff. But I do that same pink wash here underneath his chest and his abs here, and under his neck and stuff. This kind of adds like a little bit of shadowing, a little bit of like light bleed, so kind of looks like when the light kind of goes through, you know, like if you hold your hand up to the light, you can kind of see, like the pink shining through. You can see your blood and stuff in your skin. That's kind of what I was trying to replicate. So yeah, I think that's kind of pulls it together. It looks really bright on camera, like while it's wet, but you can kind of tell by looking up there at his chest how like matted that color is now. It's not so bright. It kind of helps add that like pink shadowing and stuff. So this is a little bit of dark brown here, going through and painting his I don't want to say skirt, but what is it? It's like a safety thing, right? It's like a leather like welding vest for his pants essentially. And so let's just get some dark brown. You can see his helmet now is this dark brown mix that I made, and that looks a lot better, that dark color. This color almost reminds me of like Mando's like leg armor. It's kind of that same dark metalish color. And so yeah, now painting his leather hood. Paint all the brown first, and I always paint a couple layers of all that stuff. He gets some of this darker mustardy yellow for his gloves. He wears these like cotton gloves, and then he's got the leather straps that hold his like metal like wrist guards on. So I just paint all this yellow first. Then I can go ahead and start working on some leather. So this is his leather belt. Top and bottom of his belt is this leather, and the actual middle part of his belt's like a double belt. Everybody in Star Wars wears two belts. They wear a base belt and then a secondary belt on top. So the base belt gets this leather, and the secondary belt on top gets black. So this is his little box thing. I don't know exactly what it's supposed to be, but this goes on his belt. So I'm just painting that leather strap brown. And this is supposed to be like the indicator light, the power light, or whatever. I mixed up some white and some yellow, made this kind of like sickly yellow color, and I'm just going through and painting his entire eyeball this color. It's another thing I learned from watching a lot of videos on people painting skin tones and stuff, is that painting eyeballs is never, you never use pure white for eyes. You always kind of use like a light yellow for that kind of stuff, or else it just kind of looks like super bright and unrealistic, which is, you know, you think like, oh yeah, your eye's white, and I've always kind of painted eyes like that, so yeah, it's kind of cool. Everything else gets black. This little box is all black. His belt got painted black, and I painted his like welding gun. That is all black base coat, so that the silver dry brush on top of it can shine through better. The trim on his cloak thing, his like hood, gets more of that like dark mustard yellow, same as his gloves, and I think the same as his helmet. Yeah, I think it's the same as his helmet. Yeah, go through, paint a couple layers of that on. Now here is a chunk of welding visor. Just cutting a little square out of this. You can cut this with an X-Acto knife if you just kind of keep cutting over the same line, and then you can just kind of snap it off. And you just gotta pull it off the plastic. So then I just kind of glue this in from the back. I just put a couple dabs in the corners here, just to make sure that like the glue doesn't run out. If the glue touches the front that you're going to be seeing, it'll fog up, it'll turn like white. So I try to just put just enough glue in there to tack this in place from the corners without doing that. And I think this looks really great, like on its own. When you put it on the helmet, yeah, you don't see any light through the back of it. You just see the back of the helmet, so it stays dark anyway. So like I said, if you just painted it a gloss black, I don't know if you'd really see any difference in it. But I know it's there, so it's better to me. Now we're kind of in the gluing phase, so I glued the visor to his helmet. I glue his battery pack here to his belt. And then I glue his torch. This little torch rod goes in the base of his torch. I think while I was doing something else, I snapped this off once. So this you probably could glue on very last. I glue his helmet to his head. Then I glue his head and everything to his torso. Let that sit for a little bit. The side of his battery pack has like this little silver area. And yeah, I go through now with some silver and some gold. And just start adding this, you know, his bracers are all silver. His torch is silver. His half of his gun is silver. It's a lot of silver, a lot of metal. The other thing too is I sprayed this with a matte clear, a clear matte varnish, and I think I sprayed it after I painted the metallic stuff, which is a mistake. If you're gonna spray a clear coat, I always spray it before you do like a metallic paint. It kind of takes the shine away from the metallic. Even if you spray it with a gloss sealer, it still kind of does the same thing. It takes the actual kind of like pearl out of it. So I sprayed it with the matte clear after I did some of this stuff, and then I went back through on top of it and painted it again. And I think that's not a bad idea, because if it ends up like chipping off of the clear or gets bumped or scratched or whatever, you still have that color underneath the matte, so it doesn't go back down to primer, you know what I mean? So it looks a little better. Using a pencil, and I drew out his pupils here. I wanted to draw them first just to make sure that I liked them, and also it gave me a shape to follow and not like painted this freehand. This painting black is always, to me, it's like that's the hard part, because there's kind of coming back from it, but it takes a lot of paint to fix that, to paint over black. So I wanted to really make sure I was happy with it. Yeah, so I glue his head on now. I guess I didn't glue it on before. Or maybe I did and I took it off because I knew I had to do the eyes and stuff. So yeah, that's where I almost ruined this entire project. That was silver. That was a can of silver paint. And I was painting this late at night, and I grabbed that can and I was showing the camera, and I was just about to spray it when I looked at it and I said, oh my god, that's silver paint. So yeah, I almost ruined this entire, however long it took me to paint this, a long time. That would have been it, man. That would have been back to the beginning. So I'm very glad that didn't happen, but I'm happy that I caught that on camera. So there you go. Make sure you read your paints. That's another great tip in this video. Okay, so black and brown. A lot of water. This is a wash coat on top. I always seal my stuff with a matte clear coat first before you do your wash. That way your wash doesn't soak into the paint. You can always wash it off mostly if you're not happy with it. But if you don't seal it, the black wash will actually dye your paint. It'll like soak into the paint and actually like stick into that paint and look. You'll have to repaint it because it'll always be like dyed darker color. So yeah, I always do that. And it also helps your paint, if it stays wet, it also helps your paint run into the creases a lot better if it has a matte sealer on top of it first. You can kind of just dab your brush on it and it just kind of naturally finds the high and low spots. And then you can just kind of, wipe some of that off. And it keeps all that stuff in the recesses and looks pretty natural. So yeah, we are coming up to the end. Anytime you're weathering, you always know you're at the end. So his helmet was too clean, even with the weathering. So I went through with some silver and I dried brushed all these chips, all these scratches, all these dents into this visor and his helmet. And I think this is kind of what sells the fact that this is made out of metal. And I think there was other spots too. I think I dry brushed his. Well, maybe I didn't. I don't know. I'm sure I did. I don't know if I filmed it. Anything metal, I always kind of dry brush a little silver on top just to add a little bit of interest, a little bit of texture. And yeah, so with the silver scratches, I'm pretty sure that is it coming to a close, other than his hair. So the print that I have came with his beard and his eyebrows, and I wasn't super happy with them. I mean, they're fine. But since I went for more of a realistic paint job, I really wanted to have like real hair on there. And I had some of this cotton like stuffing laying around, and I just kept twisting it and twisting it and twisting it until it made these little like almost like ice cubes, like not ice cubes, but like icicles, like in the wintertime on your roof. Basically just these kind of strands, and I would kind of get them to shape, and then I would cut them, and then I made a couple more. I made some thinner, some smaller, some longer, and then the other thing you could use too is like some thread, or you could even buy like real like doll hair, like white doll hair. Add some strands on here. His eyebrows in that picture you can see down there in the corner. His eyebrows are more like individual hairs than kind of what I made for his eyebrows. And even his like goatee or Fu Manchu or whatever it is more like individual, like almost whiskers than like an actual like beard or mustache. But for what this is, I was pretty happy with how this looked, and it was fuzzy. You could tell it was hair, and I was happy with it, and most importantly, my wife loved it, so that's all that mattered. She keeps this guy on her nightstand, and I'll have to make another one of these and paint another one if I ever start working on my basement the way I want to. I want to make it, I want to add his little doorway down there and make it the actual, like have an actual like little room on the other side that you can look into, like a little mechanic workshop area. I think that'd be super fun. And yeah, so if you want to make your own, I have the templates for the door, and I'll put a link to the file that I got. There's a lot of other better files. If you want the actual guy from Mandalorian, there's lots of files for that guy too. So I don't know if that's supposed to be early, like young Boba Frick, or not Boba Frick. I'm not 100% sure. But for this, I made a Boba Frick, and I made the door from the Mandalorian because it's super cool, and I hope you guys like it, and I will catch you guys next time I make something cool.